Hey, this is Professor Homa. Welcome to P5 Painting Getting Started, and I'm just going to go over Getting Started. And this is the image that I'm going to go with here, and it's actually a composite image. It has the tractor. I decided not to go with this image and go with more of a summer image. Now, if I take away the tractor from, I like this picture, but it's very desolate, and the tractor doesn't really kind of go with it. So I decided to go with more of a summer picture. And you can see this kind of almost needs something a little bit, and I add the tractor to it, and now it has like a balance. There's this top area with the tree, top left area, that kind of balances off with the tractor area on the bottom left. You can even see the shapes of the clouds here. They form kind of this little arc shape here, and it kind of mirrors the arc shape of the cloud. So it's kind of a nice composition. It has some horizontal lines going across with the trees in the background. There's a shadow going across. So there's a lot of action going on here. There's a lot of angles in this image, so it's a nice image to work with. There's foreground, there's midground, and there's kind of background going on here. There's some mountains in the background, there's tree lines in the back, there's clouds, so there's a lot to work with. And keep in mind that some of these things, as I draw them, like even the clouds for instance, I'm going to have probably a couple different clouds that I'm going to draw, and I'm going to make sure I put them on different layers, because this little cloud up here, it's a little wispy kind of cloud. That may not be handled the same way I do this kind of cloud or some of the other clouds. Some of these areas that I have here with the trees, they're probably going to be done with maybe like a brush in Photoshop afterwards. I'll give it a very basic shape, but I can rough it up a little in Illustrator with a kind of roughen operation or roughen filter in Illustrator, and then maybe go in with kind of a leaf brush in Photoshop and kind of make that look really rough. Same thing with some of the grass down here. Some of these other areas will just get textures. Even the tree line, I could probably just give a texture and that'll be fine for the tree line. The clouds, I might do some different effects, some lighting effects. I might adjust the opacity, different things with the clouds, some gradients in the background. And then the tractor itself, I'll probably build up with a lot of different shapes. The treads might be separate shapes that I put on there and have little shadows on them. But I just want to show you getting started with this so that you can see how I start with the biggest shapes first. And I'll even go a little bit over the pencil tool, because you may want to start things with the pen tool, but the pencil tool will kind of give you more of a hand-drawn look. Now, even though I have a composite image in Photoshop, what I'm going to do is just highlight this whole image. Even though it's a couple layers, I'll highlight the whole image, and I'm just going to do copy merged. And I'm going to go to Photoshop, and I already have one here, but I'll go over setting up setting it up again. I'll go File, New, and I'll make sure that I just set it up for landscape, and that's all I really need. It's in CMYK. That's okay right now. We could even change it to RGB, but that's fine for what we're working on now. I'll hit OK. So we're going to have kind of a horizontal 8.5 by 11 or 11 by 8.5, and I'm just going to paste in my image that I'm working on. It may come in very large right now, so I'm going to scale it down. I'll just grab the corners with the arrow tool and scale it down. I'll hold Shift so I don't distort it. So it's probably higher resolution than I want, and you may have something that's lower resolution. And I'll zoom back in, and I'll just make sure it fills up the page for the most part. Now, even though we're working with vectors, so we'll have some flexibility as far as resizing it, but right now I'm just going to kind of center it and put it in there by eye, and then I'm going to start managing my layers. Now, as far as my layers, I'm going to have one image on the bottom, so I'll find my layers palette, and I'll just name that, original image, just so I know that that's the one. Now, I may move that around, I may turn it on and off, but that's going to be the one I start with. The next thing I start with is going to be something that, whatever the biggest shape is going to be in the background, and I'm thinking it's the sky. So I'm going to make a new layer here, and I'm going to call it Sky. And what I'll do is I'll just make a big rectangle that's blue. And I'll make sure it goes behind, because remember, it's going to be behind everything, so I'm not worried about it right now. I'll just make a big rectangle, and I'll just find a nice kind of light blue color, and that's about it. I don't even have to worry if the color's perfect. That's fine for now. And then I'm going to turn it off. That's all I need, because it's going to be behind a lot of other things. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some foreground elements. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit so I can see this a little better. And I'll even move, well, I should make a layer here. I'm going to make a layer. Now, I have to think about what's going to be on top next. And I'm probably I think what I'll do is that little bit of mountain in the background. So I'll make a new layer, and I'll just call it mountains. And all I have to do here is probably just do a little a little rectangle, and that's about it. Now if it's not the right shape, I'll change the color a little bit. You could even eyedrop it if you want. So if you'd want to move this and actually take the eyedropper and sample the color from the mountain, you could do that. Comes up with kind of a grayish color, and I'll kind of move that back into place. Now I could even flip this around so I can see this. Now if you drew a rectangle and you don't want it to be a rectangle, we're going to start using the pencil tool a little bit. And the way the pencil tool works is, well, actually let me show you this. The way the pencil tool works, I'm going to draw a rectangle here. And you could start with any shape. It could be any kind of path, but I'll just use a rectangle because it might be simpler. If you take the pencil tool and if you double click on it, they have some settings, and by default it says edit selected paths, and that's actually what we want to do. It also has these tolerance settings, which basically the best way to understand is the further to the right they are, and I just move them both together. The further to the right they are, the more loose it is, the less anchor points you have. The further to the left it is, that's going to be the closer it follows the way your hand works. So if you want something real general curvy, you'd kind of move it to the right. So I'm just going to leave it kind of maybe about a quarter of the way over right now. And the way this works is on an active path, meaning it's selected. You kind of have to, I kind of always say, get on the train tracks, get off the train tracks, and then get back on again. Meaning you want to start drawing on it, and then if you want to veer off a little, you can veer off, but then you should always get back on. And what it'll do is it'll redraw that path. Now, the distance of the anchor points depends on how you set this. If I move these things up real high, if I set the fidelity up real high and the smoothness high, if I do another part here and I go off the path and come back on the path, it's going to be real smooth. You can see what it did. It only made 2 anchor points. So you might want to experiment a little bit as far as how detailed you want your paths that you're redrawing. If they're mountains or something like that, they don't have to be that detailed. And what you don't want to do is start on the path and then go off the path, because you'll make separate paths here. Or worse, it may redraw something completely. That actually worked okay there. But if you go in little small areas, it might actually wipe out what you already did. So you don't want to start on a path and then basically just veer off and stay off, because it'll almost redraw the entire path and eliminate what you had. So going back to the one I'm working on, this thing here, I'll do the same thing. I'll kind of start on the path. I'll go off a little bit. Now obviously the mountain doesn't go that much, but I'll follow the mountain a little bit and then make sure I get back on the path at the end. I could have probably moved this over just a little bit more, but that works fine for what we're doing. It's a little bit of mountain that's showing in the background, but I'll make this fidelity a little bit less, a little bit closer when I do this kind of tree line in the back. So I'm going to make a new layer and I'll call it tree line. And also this layer that I just did with the mountain, I'm just going to turn that off. And I'll go on the tree line layer and I'll do my tree line. Now obviously it's going to be like a dark green color, and I'm not going to worry about these trees yet, or the tractor, because that's going to go over top of it, and I'm not going to worry about the fields. The green wheat field and the alfalfa and the corn that's over here and the ground. I'm not going to worry about that. Matter of fact, I don't have to worry about the bottom of the tree line because other things are going to go over top of it. I'm just going to worry about the top. And you can draw with the pencil too. You don't have to start with the, you could do this. You could just say, well, I'm going to just rough this out with the pen tool real quick and just make a real basic shape. You could just kind of, click and do that if you'd rather start, because, if you're using a mouse rather than some kind of like stylus or something, it can be a pain. So you might want to just start with something real rough like this and just get the basic shape and not worry about all the little details. And even when it goes over to the end, I'm not sure how it goes, but I'll even make sure that this goes underneath a little bit, because I'm going to have fields that are going to go over top of that. So I'm not going to worry about the bottom of this too much. But then this is where I may want to, even zoom in a little bit so I could follow this. I'll close my layers and I'll use my pencil tool and I'll follow this. Remember, you want to stay on the track and then go off. And now I'll follow this a little bit better so it follows the shapes of the trees. And you can get back on at some point just to see how you're doing. And that looks okay. If there's a part you missed, you could just go back on. Just make sure you get on the path and then off the path. Again, here, I'll follow this a little better. And it doesn't have to be perfect. They're just trees in the background. But I'll follow that the best I can. And if, your hand gets tired on the mouse, just kind of stop, find a nice place to stop, and then just continue what you're working. You know, you don't want to try to do the whole thing and then find out it didn't come out that well. So and here's an area here that I got off track a little bit. So that's all I need with that. If I want to fill it with like a dark green color, I'll go back here and then go to my fill color and just choose like a dark green, and I could just do that for now and then turn it off. And that's the way I'm going to start this up. I'm going to start kind of doing bigger areas of my image and then working to smaller areas. So what I have so far, you know, is my tree line. I have my sky that's covered up like that. I have my mountains that are there that I don't have filled yet. And then I'm going to do my grass, and then I'm going to do my trees. So that's what I have coming next. So I'll do some of that without recording it, and then I'll come back and we'll catch up, and then we'll keep moving on.